We're going to actually have a panel discussion around some of these themes, and so Pete is going to lead us in some questions for some of our friends here.
All right, so I'll start with you, Krishan, since you just spoke, and then we'll go around. So we all know that you came from Australia. You probably came into the worst, you couldn't get into a much more difficult, painful situation than moving here with 4 daughters. And lovely wife, Danny, is over there in the second row. Documentaries made about the show. I mean, you just had so much pressure, 3 congregations. So if you just share, when you think about your rhythms, you mentioned Sabbath, because it gets practical here. I mean, you had a tremendous pressure. You had so much to do. You could have worked a 40-hour a day and it wouldn't have been enough. So what rhythm, daily, whether it's weekly, yearly, what has been for you the most significant for slowing you down? Because you were a racehorse on steroids coming into this, into a race that was already running that you had nothing to do with, that was going faster than you probably ran back in Australia. So what was most significant for you for your own rhythm of slowing down that might be helpful to everybody here?
Look, this sounds like a setup because my answer is to do with the emotionally healthy work
what aspect?
So coming into the city and then sitting in the coursework for emotionally healthy relationships originally, spending 2 minutes of silence and doing the daily office and getting that in place, and it was such a wrestle, and it's still a wrestle. It's still not a natural lean in for me. I still have to work at that aspect, but to pause, to be in silence, and then the tools that I found that gave me a way to express what was going on in my heart and in my spirit was massive. So I'd grown up. I grew up with 2 brothers. We just played together all of the time. There's never a context where I talked about my emotions. And there was never a context in which I saw any of that modeled. So sitting in some of that coursework, listening to you talk about your emotions in a conversation that you guys had together, that's the first time that it stood out in my mind that I've seen that modeled. So what it looks like to not just sit in silence, but then to understand what's going on under the surface and be able to give expression to that, and then have a way to engage with what's going on under the surface. Otherwise, I'm just seeing the tip of the iceberg, and the meditation and the racing of my mind is just on what's on the surface. So I'm over and over and over again just going on what I'm seeing on the surface of my own life. To have tools to be able to go, well, what's feeding into that? What am I experiencing? And then what's underpinning those emotions? Like, what's the thinking? What's the stuff that's feeding into that? So now I can start to think it feels like think at a deeper level about the things that are going on in my world. And now it starts to be productive meditation as opposed to just a racing kind of.
So if Danny was here, speak for Danny, we're not supposed to do that, but if she was going to say you becoming a person who actually slows down enough to feel what's going on inside of you versus just racing, what would she say has been the biggest benefit for her as your spouse, your kids, the church in that?
I mean, this is so much easier when I can just speak for Danny.
Yeah, absolutely.
We should do this all the time.
Until you get home.
I don't know why we've ever tried to do it any other way. You guys don't have that luxury, but this is awesome. I think it might be that she's never been able to read my mind, and I grew up in a culture that is all about reading into what you're saying or what you're doing, and so my default is that you should be able to know how I'm feeling without me having to express it.
That's awesome.
And so I think she's probably appreciative that I've come to terms with my expression of what's going on in my internal world that she can't know otherwise.
That's awesome.
And trust then for me becomes I need to trust that as I express what I need and what I'm feeling, when she then does that, that's still real love towards me.
That's great. Wow. Well, that was very unexpected about slowing down for emotions. If one of you want to pick up on that, if that was related to one of the biggest things that impacted you or helped you to slow down, if one of you guys want to pick up on that, or I'll just ask you straight out.
I can certainly speak to that. I think in a work context in particular, that angst, that irritability is so very linked to a lack of slowing down, is what I've found. So when I start to feel like, why are people asking me for another thing, right? Seriously, like entitlement, burnout, all those things, there is generally a very straight line to, Jessica, when's the last time you slowed down? When's the last time you got quiet? When's the last time you were still before the Lord? And if there's ever that gap, like you were saying, the life and death thing, Pete, that's what came to my mind, is like, oh, I'm gonna cut some ears off of people if I don't have this moment of like putting it all back into perspective, slowing down and getting quiet before the Lord. So I definitely see this correlation between just reacting and not really seeing, oh, there's just stuff underneath the surface that I need to slow down and get in touch with, take before the Lord, process with Him.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Drew, let's go to you for a second here. So what would you, what rhythm of the many shifts you've made in your life has been most helpful and significant for you? Why don't you start with, that you think might be helpful to everybody here, talking about a slowed down spirituality?
Yeah, I think Sabbath keeping, which has been mentioned before, for sure, a 24-hour period by which I'm going to stop, rest, delight, and contemplate. In addition to that, we talk about crafting a rule of life being a frame or a set of rhythms by which my whole life would be about Jesus, and how to stay as disciplined with that as possible. So every semester, so both in January as well as in September, I'm crafting a rule of life. My wife and I, we sit down and we talk about the rhythms by which we want to live. And so a lot of that is around Sabbath keeping, of course, daily office, pausing throughout the day, and spending significant time in silence. Kind of with this theme, though, of like these moments when I'm not even aware of it. 2 weeks ago, I got 2 separate emails from various people, and they both emailed me, and it was just asking if we could have coffee. And the emails were basically, Drew, can we sit down sometime? I know that it seems like you're everywhere, so I don't, I know you might not have time. And like, both of those emails, it came the same day, and I was like, I'm everywhere? What's that about? Like, where did this come from? So the first thing I did was, obviously, I prayed to God, and I said, God, is this something that I need to change? I went to my wife, and I said, I got these 2 different emails from 2 separate people. Like, is that the kind of presence that I'm carrying with people? And she said, you might want to think about it and talk about it. And so I ended up telling our elders about it as well. Just told them about, hey, I got these 2 emails about, and I'm wondering if that's the presence that I'm carrying, that I'm too distracted, that I can't be present. And so it was enough for me with all these different checks to realize I think I need some extended silence even more. So then it was, okay, I need to take another full day just to clear everything from the calendar and be still. I was afraid to go to my staff and ask them what they thought, so I haven't done that yet, but maybe they'll tell me after this conference. But yeah, so I think just the intentionality of those markers, the little hints, and obviously family is a big part of that, but I would say the rule of life keeps me, and then as we go along, there are these moments that I know I need even more times of silence, which is when I will carve out a whole day or so. So I try to do a monthly day alone with God as well.
That's great. Thank you so much. And again, if you don't know Drew's context, I mean, he's pastoring Hope, which has 3 campuses and a 4th kind of connection over there in Brooklyn with Edwin. So it's quite a large entity with a lot going on. Let's say, just like Krishan and Danny here at Hillsong. But let's move to Jordan and Jessica, who are pastoring Renaissance Church in Harlem, with also a lot going on. And I was there as everyone was trying to grab a piece of you after a service, and had a good chuckle on that. So, Jordan, what has been the most significant for you in slowing down on this journey? And you've made a turn. What were you like before? Maybe quickly, just that. And then what's been most significant that you think might be helpful to folks here as they're listening?
Like Drew, I feel like I grew up in a context where failure would be anything that's not amazing. So unless I achieve something that's really excellent, then it's a failure. It's either an A+ or an F. And I'll never forget one time, I got like A's, or I got like I got all A's and like one B, and my mother was like, that's okay. And I remember one time I played basketball growing up, and I played the game of my life versus a guy who ended up, playing in the NBA. And I was like on cloud nine. I had like, literally, I've never played better before or since. And I'll never forget on my car ride home, my father said, "You missed 2 foul shots." Like that was it. So like for me, it was like perfection or nothing. Like you were just a failure. And my parents thought that they were motivating me, but what they were really doing was creating this insatiable desire for an unreachable goal, because I actually never reached these goals. So taking this into pastoring, of course, I'm a phenomenal pastor now, because I'm carrying these insatiable desires to be perfect, to be exemplary, to be something that's never really been seen before. And for me, the blessing of embracing my limitations. And so when going into Sabbath, very rarely do I feel like, actually I got a lot accomplished this week. I really don't have that many things breathing down my neck. Every now and then that happens, but for most of the time I have to stop and I have to say, Jordan, you are a limited person, and as a model as a witness to myself, as a witness to my staff and the leaders, to stop even when things are not perfectly buttoned up. Of course, I try to do what I can do to close things up, but for the most part, I'm going into Sabbath wrestling, dealing with this real resistance that I haven't done all the things that I wanted to do, that there's still other things that are asking for my attention. So really to truly lay down before the Lord, I have limits, and to embrace those limits to me as a gift, that God wants to bless me in me coming to embrace and accept my limitations so that I can go into a guilt-free Sabbath, to stop, to truly rest, to really delight, and to really contemplate God's goodness and His love for me. So Sabbath for sure has been that practice anchoring me when I go into it, really truly laying down and embracing, asking the Lord to make me more aware and to receive His limits to me as a gift, even though they certainly don't feel like a gift.
It's awesome. Wow. You guys are a wealth. All right, so here's what we'll do with the final question for each of you to answer in our remaining time. So here we are, we're talking about something very revolutionary, a slowed down spirituality. I loved your expression, we can take the kid out of the Indian kid, you can take the kid out of the slums, but you can't take the slum out of the kid. That's all of us, I think. So, all right, Drew, let's start with you, we'll come this way. First step, you'd recommend, we're just focusing on, helping folks slow down. It's like a freight train going, 100 miles an hour. I think we've all probably here in this room read the books, know the talks. We've given the talks, but fundamentally doesn't quite fully slow down the train, a little bit for a while. What would you recommend for folks here listening as a first step to slow down?
In Alcoholics Anonymous, one of the phrases is that 90% of sobriety is honesty. Mm-hmm. And I am so honest to myself. And I realized I just need to take inventory to people closest to me, who know me, who are unafraid to tell me the truth.
Wow.
And so I know that, for instance, Emotionally Healthy Discipleship on the website, there's an inventory one can take. Mm. And I would just highly encourage, if you're married, to take it together. And just to take inventory first of where am I truly. And I think being able to admit honestly, gosh, my rhythms are, the shadow side of my leadership, of the manner by which I am present with people. I think those emails were just an indicator, and that was just a couple of weeks ago for me, of is something something off in my personhood. And these are two leaders in our church. So, and they weren't even suggesting it as like as an accusation of anything. They were just making a comment. I know it's going to be hard for you to meet because you're everywhere. And I was like, oh, I need to take inventory. So I think and I think that's what silence does. And so I would say to take inventory would be best, is the first step.
That's awesome. Let me just repeat that. So it's at emotionallyhealthy.org/mature. It's a 15-minute assessment you can do about where am I on these rhythms, and get a good sense of yourself. So it's a free thing. Just take it online, emotionallyhealthy.org/mature. It's just very interesting. The fact that you're saying don't just race through those red lights when they come to you. You took those 2 emails like, oh, maybe God's saying something here. And versus, I think most of us, we have so much going on, we don't have time for it. We just race through. No, they don't get it. I'm fine. So that's really helpful. Okay, fantastic. Krishan.
Just before I do, if I could flick a question your way for you to maybe answer at the end. I know there'd be a number of people in this space who are involved in churches but working full time, and the pace of the demands of that in this city is relentless. And there's many times you feel like you've got to keep performing and keep doing things to just be viable to live here. And you've pastored in this city for a number of years, and so I'd be really interested in your pastoral advice for us. I think for me, accountability, like I think you're talking about being able to have someone or being able to have a place to be honest. I've had the remarkable privilege of sitting with a Jesuit priest once a week for the last number of, I don't know why my mic cut out as soon as I said Jesuit priest. Was that a thing? Was that just me? No? Not allowed to say that? Okay, so I've sat with someone who's a spiritual advisor, and it's just been so rich to be able to sit in a place where there's some accountability and some direction for me to learn that, because I'd like to pride myself on being able to just learn all of this stuff myself and do it on my own and just have the Lord teach me, but I've needed more help than
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, Jessica.
Yeah, I think for me, it has actually been to extend grace toward myself. So I think it's easy to put this on as another yoke. And all of us in ministry are type A people. It's very easy to be like, it's one more thing I got to do, and I'm failing at it, and kind of getting into that cycle. And so to really remind myself that this is not a yoke, it is an invitation. It is an invitation. And so even when there are times when I get out of rhythm because I was sick, the kids were sick, there was this, there was that, it's nothing to just pick up and start again, you know? And so I often say, if I'm consistent in anything, it's at falling off the wagon and hopping right back in. I will do it 100 times, and because I really try to remind myself, this is God's invitation to me. It is not a yoke, it is not a burden. So that's my biggest first step.
Thank you so much, Jessica.
I would say don't wait for your feelings to want to do these things before you actually do them. I don't know if it's you, Pete, or Jerry that said our emotions are like kids on vacation. We can't put them in the trunk or the driver's seat. So a lot of us, we stuff our emotions down and we put them in the trunk, or some of us put them in the driver's seat and you let them take the wheel, and you don't want your 8-year-old at the wheel. So I think for a lot of us, we're waiting for our feelings to want to do these things, and then you just never do. I mean, you're just kind of caught up in the machine. So don't wait for your feelings to give you verification that now's the time to start. Just start. I heard this quote that said, an ounce of effort is better than a ton of intention.
Wow.
So to start poorly, I mean, we first started doing Sabbath, we got 4 hours, and we had to fight everything inside of us just to get 4 hours of no work. And of course the goal was 24 hours of time away, and if you have small children, that's obviously, you have to be creative with that. But to really, truly fight with that, and I don't think that we would have been able to work our way up to that, even with silence. I mean, Pete does 20 minutes at a time sometimes. If you can't do that, don't compare yourself to someone else down the line. Just start where you are, do what you can, and really, truly make that effort and allow the Lord to continue to lead you on that journey.
Let's give them a hand, everybody. Thank you so much, guys. Fabulous.
Thanks, friends.